Monday, May 12th, 2003, and this is the beginning of an interview with Edward Sipes at, at this home at 419 North Bethlehem Avenue in Marion, Indiana. Mr. Sipes is 54 years old, having been born on September 12th, 1948. My name is Troy Sipes. I will be the interviewer. Edward Sipes is my father. Mr. Sipes, do you remember the day you received your draft notice?
Yes, yes, I do. I was still living at home with my parents in Marion, Indiana, and I was working the night shift, and the notice was received in the mail. My parents woke me up as I was still sleeping to inform me, well, actually just to give me the letter, which I opened, and inform me that I had been drafted.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Very clearly. We were transported by bus to Fort Knox, Kentucky. The first week we were there, we went through a battery of tests. We arrived late at night when we arrived at Fort Knox at the training center, and a drill sergeant met us as we climbed off the bus, and that was our first realization that our world had changed. And we spent a week taking tests and learning some things about the military, the way it functioned, and after that week, the purpose of the testing was to find out where we were best suited to serve in what capacity. And at that time in 1969, when I was drafted, there was a lot of people being drafted, and we were held for another week in the training or the testing area due to an overload of incoming military. We spent the second week learning a little bit about military drill, but mostly just cleaning up and picking up cigarette butts, etc.
What was going through your mind during those first few days? Were you angry, upset, satisfied about being able to serve your country?
I was pleased that I could serve my country. There was no question. My father was in World War II. It was an honor to be able to serve my country. The first few days, it was more confusion, feeling confused. Things happened so fast, and you were kept busy constantly from 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. She grabbed a few hours sleep and it all started again. Your hair was shaved, well, trimmed really close to your head. People that you had grown up with, you didn't recognize them because everybody had their heads shaved. And it was scary because you knew that the war in Vietnam was going on, and there was a good chance that you would be in that war in just a few short weeks.
Okay, tell me about your boot camp experiences.
Boot camp was very interesting. It was interesting in that you learned a lot. They taught you how to deal with situations, how to fire weapons, how to kill other humans, but also how to work within an organization, to work as a team, and it was constantly moving. You learn to march, you learn to fire weapons, you learn first aid, they just taught you many, many things. And it is basic. They did teach you just the basics, but you learned enough that you could survive if you needed to.
Do you remember your instructors from boot camp and other areas of
My other training,
yes, other training aside from boot camp, specialized training? Do you remember your instructors?
I remember my instructors. I don't necessarily remember all their names. My drill sergeant was a short, very slender black man that loved to sing when we marched, and he had all of us sing. It helped the miles go by and made life a little bit easier in that respect. There were others that taught us weaponry. Sergeant Bell was very good in teaching us how to use and maintain, clean our weapons. I don't remember the captain of our company, but he was a pretty nice guy that kept us all together and, for the most part, healthy, and definitely kept us busy.
How did you get through boot camp and your other specialized training?
Well, boot camp, it was just a matter of surviving it. We were kept so busy that you really didn't have a chance to think about not surviving it. My father, on the morning that I was drafted, informed me, or on the day that I actually was inducted into the Army, told me to listen to the sergeants in basic training because they were the men that would teach me things that would keep me alive. So I took that to heart, and I listened, and I learned from those sergeants. And after boot camp, after basic training, life became easier. The officers, as well as the NCOs, were more friendly. In many cases, it became a first name basis when not on duty, and they were just, you were through the rough and tough, and then it was more real teaching.
Okay. You previously stated that you served during Vietnam, but I just want to clarify for the record, which war did you serve in?
Well, I served from February of 1969 to February of 1971. It was during the Vietnam War. I actually did not go to Vietnam.
Okay. Where exactly did you go?
From Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I took my basic training, I was sent to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for my military police training, and I spent 21 months there.
Where exactly did you go? Did you stay after you received your military training, your military police training? Did you stay where you were, or did you move again?
No, I remained at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for the remaining 21 months of my military service.
Okay. Do you remember arriving at Fort Leavenworth and what it was like?
Yes, we arrived, and due to the lack of housing for non-commissioned personnel, we were actually placed into a bachelor officer's quarters because they were available. It was 2 men to a room, and it was so different. It was a building that was built for the officers, and it was wonderful compared to the barracks where you slept with 45 other men all in the same building, all in one big room. To be with 2 men to a room and actually had facilities in the room, and it was very, very nice.
Okay. At Fort Leavenworth, once you received your military police training, what was your job?
I was placed with an experienced military police officer, and we patrolled the fort actually in patrol cars, not jeeps. And we had an assigned area that we patrolled, and we did the same thing basically that any police officer would do.
Do you recall the name of your partner?
Our partners rotated. We never had a specific partner. It was almost changed anywhere from a daily to a weekly basis. So everyone served with everyone else.
Did you ever come under fire while serving at Fort Leavenworth?
One time, there was a young lady that had been drinking and had decided to, well, we're not exactly still to this day. I'm not sure if she had decided to take her own life or if she was going to take someone else's life. But it was late at night. She was actually sitting on the curb in the military cemetery. Being as we were on patrol, we drove through. She was sitting there. We inquired as to what she was doing, and she pulled a gun from behind her back and started shooting.
What happened?
Well, she fired 2 or 3 shots. We were sitting on a hill, so we rolled back down the hill and got out of the line of fire. We called for reinforcements. My partner, Specialist Zawinski, almost didn't get that out. He exited the police car and had me drive. I put my bright lights on this young lady. He went around behind her in some trees and was approaching her from behind and was attempting, since I had her blinded with the headlights of the car, he was attempting to sneak up on her. Unfortunately, the major, who was the officer of the day, got on the radio and announced that we were all to extinguish our headlights. I explained to him that my partner was in the act of sneaking up on this woman, and I was given an order by this officer to extinguish my lights, which I did. That in turn not only left myself, my partner, blinded because now it was suddenly dark, but also the young lady who had fired the pistol at us got away. It took us 4 hours. We finally found her and was able to arrest her 4 hours later.
Okay, I was wondering if you could tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, we had an incident one time with an officer that refused to pull over when we attempted to stop him for speeding in a school zone. We followed this officer, and he went to the racket club. When we approached him to inform him that we were going to write him a ticket, he informed us that he didn't have time for that he had a racquetball time, and he was not going to stand around and talk to us, and walked off. We reported in to our sergeant, who joined us at the racket club, and the three of us, sergeant, my partner, and I, entered the racket club, walked to the court where the officer was playing racquetball, and went in and arrested him and took him right out of his racquetball game. That was memorable because the vast majority of officers were very respectful to the military police, and this officer was not, and that was one of only maybe 2 incidents in my whole military police time that I had a problem with an officer.
Okay, were you awarded any medals or citations?
The basic training medals of firing weaponry, also our military police training, the medals that we received for our accuracy in firing our weapons, which include the M14 rifle, the M16 rifle, the .45 caliber pistol, and the 12-gauge shotgun. I received medals for that accomplishment in each of those 4. Also received what we called the 90-day ribbon, which just was a good conduct ribbon. Because I was not in any combat zones, I did not receive any other citations.
While you were serving, did you stay in touch with your family?
Yes, I did. We, since I stayed stateside and was only approximately 600 miles from where I lived prior to being drafted, my parents and family were able to take a vacation and actually come and stay a week off post at a campground, and we got to visit them. We also wrote letters to each other and an occasional phone call.
At Fort Leavenworth, what was the food like?
The food was great at Fort Leavenworth. We had some really good cooks. They provided us with plenty of food, and the food was actually good, nice variety. Unlike basic training where there was a lot of food, but it wasn't always good. This food that we got in the military was good. Plus there was also other places other than the mess hall to go to eat, and we could go to the NCO club where you could order from a menu. You could also go off post to restaurants. And then we had snack bars that were available on post, where you could also get food.
Did you have plenty of supplies, ammunition, clothing, boots, socks?
We had plenty of everything. Since we were in a non-combat area, the supply line was good, and the only thing we were ever short of was manpower.
Okay. Did you feel pressure or stress while serving at Fort Leavenworth?
Fort Leavenworth is unique in the military forts or posts in that it is a war college. And at this college, which they train officers that are really from all over the world, they train them to become higher echelon officers. So on Fort Leavenworth at that time, there were 2,500 officers and only 500 enlisted men. So it was a 5-to-1 ratio, officer to enlisted man, which is very, very unusual in the military.
Did you feel as if you were under pressure all the time because of such a ratio?
Actually, because there were so many military officers, and the normal protocol of saluting was not required, and what was more confusion in trying to learn the insignias of rank, what country an officer would be from, because these people were from all over the world. And there were very few incidents where we had to deal with foreign speaking or a foreign language speaking officer, because the vast majority were English as either their primary or their secondary language. But there was pressure to, due to the ratio and the fact that the military police were evident to officers and their families from other countries, the pressure was more in using the right amount of force necessary, but keeping it to a minimum. It was a necessity to not offend, especially officers of other countries.
Okay. Was there something special you did for good luck?
No, not really. We were not in combat, so good luck was getting through another day of duty.
How did people entertain themselves?
Well, there was a lot of drinking. That seemed to be one of the favorite pastimes. We spent a lot of time together doing sporting events. We had football, baseball. We had an auto body shop on post that we could go and utilize the equipment there. We also had an airport on post where we could go and watch. They were mostly smaller planes, but you could do that. Also, there were some big cities. Kansas City, Kansas was close by. You could go and enjoy the entertainment in Kansas City. There was also an all-girls college 6 miles from post, and so for young men of teenage to early 20 years. Of course, that's always an enticement.
What did you do when you were on leave?
Well, my first leave was after basic training. I'd been gone 10 weeks, and I still had several friends that were still around. By the time I was able to take my second leave, which was almost a year later, a lot of the guys that I had grown up with and lived in the same neighborhood had either moved away, gotten married, or had also been drafted or joined a military service. So I spent a lot of time with my family, with the few friends that were still around, and it was more just a time to relax and not have someone controlling your time.
Okay, you previously stated that you served at Fort Knox and Fort Leavenworth. Did you travel anywhere else while you were in the service?
Travel, yes. Part of our job as a military police unit at Fort Leavenworth was to transport AWOLs and deserters that were brought to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. We transported them to Fort Riley, Kansas, where they were faced trial. But other than that, no.
Okay, do you recall any particularly humorous or an unusual event?
There were lots of humorous things that happened. Probably better left off of this tape. Unusual. On patrol at night, we were driving on a road that went around the officers' golf course, an officers' club and the officer golf course. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and right across the road in front of us goes a golf cart with 2 guys in it, just flying right across the road in front of us. Well, it turned out it was a couple guys from our company, and they had been doing one of our favorite pastimes, which was drinking. And so they had decided that they'd see if there were any keys left in the golf carts, and they found one, and they decided to go for a drive in the golf cart. And upon further investigation, we found that they weren't the only 2. There were 2 other pairs of guys with golf carts, and they had been running all over the golf course, chasing each other, wrecking golf carts. As it turned out, what seemed to be a very simple whoops, got drunk, shouldn't have done that, turned into be a fiasco in that they had done quite a bit of damage, and that was pretty unique. It was an unusual event for that to happen, and since you asked for unusual, that was pretty unusual.
Okay, at any time when you were serving at Fort Leavenworth, did you ever have to make bank runs for money or other things being as a military policeman?
Yes. Part of our responsibilities when the commissary, which was the military name for a grocery store, when someone had been at the commissary or I should say someone, when someone from the commissary called stating that they had money that needed to be deposited in the bank, then we would go to our armory and pick up a 12-gauge shotgun and go and pick up that person and transport them in our military police car to the bank and allow them to deposit this large sum of money, and then we would return them back to wherever. And it wasn't just the commissary, there were other on-post businesses that we also did that for, and then we'd return our shotgun and then go back to our normal.
Okay, this is side 2 of tape 1 of my interview with Edward Sipes. While serving your country, you said that you patrolled a bank and ran money to a bank. Was the bank ever robbed, or were there ever false alarms that stand out in your mind?
There were lots of false alarms. The alarm systems, which were silent alarms, that the Provost Marshal's office, which is the equivalent of the police station, the alarms would sound there, but they did not sound at the bank or the commissary, wherever the alarm was located. There was one incident when you asked me earlier about a humorous incident. In ways this was humorous. We had just made a money run for the commissary, and as it happened, our barracks was right next door to the bank, and our armory, where we needed to return the shotgun after the commissary money run. We were a block away from the bank when there was a silent alarm. We were dispatched there. I grabbed the shotgun and went running inside. My partner opened the first set of doors. I went in. As an officer came out the second set of doors, I, not knowing if he was robbing the bank, someone who had dressed up as an officer and was robbing the bank or whatever, I stuck the shotgun in his face. Well, he turned a little pale and then just dropped down to the floor. As it turns out, it was a false alarm, which we had lots and lots of those. And that was kind of humorous in a way, because this officer was not upset with us after the fact, but it was kind of funny to watch him drop to the floor as if someone had knocked him over the head.
Okay, do you recall any other particularly humorous or unusual events?
There was one unusual. The Vice President of South Vietnam came to visit, and the 60s came to visit our Fort Leavenworth. The 60s was in early 70s was a very uproarious time in our country, and there was one of many organizations, but this organization was the SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, that were somewhat violent. And when they heard that Vice President Key was visiting, they said they were going to attempt to disrupt his visit. Disrupt, we didn't know how, but I was assigned as a guard for him at the residence that he was staying, and that was unusual in that we dealt with many different federal police organizations, including the Secret Service. So that was unique in guarding a particular dignitary and being assigned to his entourage.
What were some of the pranks that you or others would pull?
Well, in basic training, we used to do lots of little things to create humor. It was a very tense time in basic because you were constantly learning and under scrutiny by the non-commissioned officers and officers of your company. So most of the things we did were small pranks, hiding someone's equipment, doing what we called short sheeting, and also being real quiet in the morning and everybody ducking out and leaving someone in bed so they get in trouble. Just simple, really childish things, but ways to relieve some of the stress.
Do you have any photographs from your time in the service?
Actually, no. I don't have very many. Several of them all of them that I did have, I got lost. I still have my book that I bought for basic training that has pictures of everyone in my basic training company, but no, I do not.
What do you think of officers or fellow soldiers?
What I thought of them then, or what do I, when I was serving, or as officers in today's military?
What you thought of them while you were serving with them, and then what you think of them now as you look back on it.
Then, officers, especially the young ones, the lieutenants, the second and first lieutenants, were very, the words we used, gung-ho, they were very, they had just come out of officer candidate training and were very excited about their ability to have authority over others. Most of those officers learned fairly quickly that their lives depended upon the people that they were in command of. The non-commissioned officers were very, very good in treating us most of the time with respect, and also in teaching us how to stay alive. Now I look back, and that's still pretty much the way I still feel. That I met some older officers who were just very, very nice gentlemen. It was no longer at that stage in their life, it was no longer a power trip, it was just had become their career and where they were comfortable with their lives at that point. And the non-commissioned officers, again, were just very, very good in teaching us. There were a few that were difficult to deal with, but we all learned in our lives to deal with difficult people.
Okay, do you recall the day your service ended?
Never forget it, February 10th, 1971. I had my own car at Fort Leavenworth. We checked out we had spent a week doing the medical exams and checking out of the post. You had to check out any and everywhere that you had any contact with the military, such as checking in your weapon, your uniforms, whatever that was assigned to you in the military. We were allowed to leave after we had all the proper authority. We were able to sign out and leave, and I drove from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, straight home to Marion, Indiana.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward?
About 3 months before I got out of the service, I had gotten married, and my wife had moved 6 weeks prior to me getting out, had moved to Marion and was living with my parents until I got out of the service. I had been working for General Motors prior to me getting drafted, and they had held my job. So when I got out, I spent about 3 days looking for a place to live and getting back in touch with my employer, and after 3 days, went back to work.
Did you ever go back to school after after your service ended?
Yes, I took some classes at Indiana Business College, and after a few months of that, decided that I did not enjoy that particular field of endeavor. I had been working back at General Motors for some time, and the advantages of working there, and also the money, made me stay there and not go back to Indiana Business College.
Was your education, the few classes that you took, was it supported by the GI Bill?
Yes, it was.
And how much of that did it cover?
It covered probably 95%. Basically, I had to buy a couple books and supplies.
Okay. Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
Yes. There was 2 guys from the state of Michigan, and one guy from Indiana, as it turns out, that I spent occasional time with after we got out. The guy from Indiana, actually he got married, and we used to visit back and forth, our wives and us couples.
Did you continue any of those relationships?
Yes. Eventually I lost contact with the guys in Michigan, but Steve Creel, who lived at Greenfield, Indiana, we stayed in contact for 3 or 4 years, and then we lost contact again.
Could you spell Creel for me?
Creel.
Okay. Were there any other relationships that really stood out? Did you have friends going into the service that you lost contact with while in the service, and then regain contact later, or any really close friends from home that passed away while in the service?
I had one friend that joined the Air Force a year prior to me getting drafted, and that relationship, I received a couple letters from him in that year, and then we lost contact. After I got out of the service, we made contact again, and to this day, we're still very close friends. I had another friend that was drafted. We were drafted at the same time, went through basic training together. He went on to NCO school and was sent to Vietnam and was killed there. He tripped up a hand grenade that was set up as a booby trap, and he was killed April 22nd, 1970. His name was Keith Lochner, and he is on the wall. And I had other friends that were also went into other branches of the military, some into the Marine Corps, some others in the Army, but and some of those friendships are still alive today.
After serving in the Army, did you join a veterans organization?
For a while, I joined the VFW, and after a couple years, I dropped out. I was not interested in continuing that type of relationship with other former military people.
What did you go on to do as a career after the war? Did you continue working at General Motors? Did you ever finish up college after deciding that it was a good idea, or was there something else?
I continued to work at General Motors and put in 30 years. I retired in 1998 and started my own business, and am still currently doing that. And no, I took some more classes basically in the computer field at a couple local universities, but never completed a degree.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yes. It influenced my thinking about war. War seems to be a glorious thing on television or in the media. When we grew up, it was cowboys and Indians, and you played soldier, but reality sinks in when you carry the casket of your friends. And you see friends that are permanently disabled, either physically or mentally, because of war. Today, I now wish we never had to have a war, because I know what it does to people. But unfortunately, we have yet to find world peace, even though I think it is a goal that we should all strive for.
Did you ever attend any military reunions?
No, and as far as I know, no one has ever, since I have returned to my hometown and have lived here since I got out of the military, and should have been easy to find. As far as I know, there have been no reunions.
How did your service and experiences while in the service affect your life?
I learned discipline. I learned that my limits, especially physically, but also mentally. It also taught me how to be organized how to organize not only my personal things, but also how to organize my life day to day, and also thinking of the future.
Okay, you said that you took some college classes, some before and some after, is that correct?
I took none before I went into the service.
Okay, so you took some afterwards. Did you complete high school?
Yes.
Okay. And you were the graduating class of?
1966.
And where did you graduate from?
Marion High School, Marion, Indiana.
Is there anything else that you would like to add to this interview that we have not covered yet?
I really think that reinstating the draft, or requiring some type of military service or government service would be good for the youth of today. The discipline, the organization, learning how to deal with situations, not necessarily war, but dealing with having the teamwork, the camaraderie, the feeling of belonging to a large unit, but also the feelings of being proud of being able to serve your country. And we are fortunate in having such a great country that where freedom is something that we all don't really respect as much as we should. It's so easy to just expect it to be that way, but without the struggles of the military draftees, volunteers, whatever, before, who have fought for our freedoms, have died for our freedom, for the liberties that we have. I think that 90% of the people, and I'm guessing at the number, that served in the military during that time frame are still, to this day, very proud of the fact that they did serve their country in some very disturbing, emotional times. And I think that would help give direction to the majority of the youth of today. And even though the military has changed, being all volunteer, I would still like to see more of our youth being utilized in the service of their country.
Once your service ended in 1971, did you ever consider serving in the military as a career, or serving more time with the military?
I thought about it, but I decided that 2 years of my life and the possibilities of continuing to fight a war that our country was mostly against, I did not want to go and serve at that time, and I became a father, a parent, and with a wife and a child. No longer was at that point, low income a desirable way to continue in a career.
Okay, last question. If there was anything that you could say to your fellow peers and younger people, what would it be?
About
Just
anything.
like something in general. Um, a word of advice, something that you might have learned while serving.
Always try to find a way out of the situation without violence. That's not something I learned necessarily in the military, but what I've learned in life. Always try to find a way to resolve an issue without violence. That is probably the best way to deal with situations. I just hope that we can someday as a world reach that. And I thank you for interviewing me, Mr. Sipes.
Okay, thank you for your time.